Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Mike Cipra, Executive Director, Friends of the Dunes. And now here's your host, Paul Bressoud.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm your host, Paul Bressoud, and today we're speaking with Mike Cipra, the Executive Director of Friends of the Dunes. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. The first thing I always ask folks is what their job entails, what they do, and then about the organization to get us started, and we can ask questions off of that.
Yeah, I'd say as executive director, I've been doing this for about 3 years with Friends of the Dunes, and I can say no 2 days have been the same. Some days I'm out on the land, maybe leading groups around the coastal dunes. Maybe one day I'm talking with partners like folks at the Wiyot Tribe or at the Bureau of Land Management. I'd say no 2 days are the same, and that's part of what keeps it exciting in working in conservation. Those different partnerships, those different opportunities to connect with people and connect about things that matter, our connection with land and the conservation of it.
You know, when I read your goals for Friends of the Dunes, I wanted to ask specifically, is educating the community the most important aspect of environmental work?
Well, I'd say that's pretty core to what Friends of the Dunes does. Paul, we've been around for 40 years now. This is our 40th year of existence at Friends of the Dunes. And we've been leading our school groups, our education programs, the Beta Dunes program, out for more than 23 years. We now have people who are environmental leaders in our community who grew up going to our education programs. In fact, even members of our board have grown up and are now contributing to the community and contributing to conservation. And they started, maybe that spark was started by them going out to the dunes, learning about this really special place we have in our backyard in Humboldt.
Is that the ongoing, I mean, the consistent over that 40 years is the educational aspect of the organization?
Well, I'd say there's a couple different prongs. One is education, of getting people to connect with these places. We find that when people know more about these areas like our coastal dunes, they fall in love with them, and people protect what they love, Paul. And so I'd say the education aspect has been there since the very beginning, since the inception of Friends of the Dunes, and it continues to be a strong part of what we do. I'd say also stewardship. Because these areas do require restoration over time. And people have been working on restoring our coastal dunes for 40 years. And you can see the results in a place like Lanphier Dunes, which is a really pristine area. It's currently managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge. But that area's had 40 years of love, of people hand pulling invasive plants, making room for native species, and the results are really stunning. It's beautiful out there. In fact, this time of year, you have the first blooms of the Humboldt Bay wallflower, which is an endangered species. And it's endangered because of a lack of habitat, but that habitat's been opened up. Those plants have come back, and it's really a success story. This idea that we have, we started with at Friends of the Dunes, that the community could be involved in both education and stewardship. And I think that's at the core of what we do.
Can you explain some of those community-based restoration programs that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So we recruit, organize, and train volunteers to go out and do restoration on the coastal dunes. And this is all by hand. Working maybe with trowels or by hand. And so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to go back to these places year after year. No herbicides. We don't use any herbicides. We don't use any heavy equipment. This is all by hand with community volunteers who've been trained in invasive species management. And we found that if you remove the invasive species, species like ice plant or European beach grass, it creates space for the natives. And there's a deep enough native seed bank that you have this really rich, beautiful mosaic of native plants that supports a wide variety of life, including we have more than 40 species of native bees in the dunes. And it's because there are things that are blooming at every time of year that help support those bees. It's a really, again, it's a really vibrant, it's a really amazing thing that's right in our backyard, going out to those coastal dunes and being able to explore.
Let me take a step back here. How do you recruit or find the volunteers to come out and do the work? And then I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the work after I hear this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cal Poly Humboldt has been a great source of volunteers, a lot of youthful enthusiasm and also care for our environment. And I'd have to say that that's been a consistent partner for us is Humboldt State, the university formerly known as Humboldt State University is now Cal Poly Humboldt. It's been a great source of volunteers. And I'd say just in general, we have more than 500 members of Friends of the Dunes, and we have, our folks who are following us on social media, it's more than 4,000 people. So we have a community, we're lucky to be in an area, Paul, where our community cares. Our community cares about the environment and cares about what the future is going to look like. And that's made tangible. Every month we go out to either the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center or the BLM's Malel Dune South, and we organize these restoration programs. And it's really heartening to see the community come together and to see that sort of energy and care for the environment made tangible.
So now I'm a regular guy and I volunteer and I head to one of these restoration programs. Am I going to get training in what is a native plant and what isn't a native plant? I mean, we don't want to send me out there not knowing what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's an important piece of it, that these restoration programs are organized. We'll have a restoration manager that's on site, and that person provides a training for the volunteers and orientation, so that people they're learning about the environment while they're working in stewardship. So absolutely, I think that's central to what we do, is that people have an understanding of what they're doing and why that matters, why that has an impact on creating a native habitat or environment that's healthy.
So just to be specific, do I go to the training first and then I go out, or is somebody working with me as I go out to work on one of the restoration projects?
You would show up, say the second Saturday of every month at the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center at 10 a.m. And there would be somebody, our restoration manager, Dante Ryman, would give you an orientation along with the other volunteers in restoration techniques and the different plants that you're going to be seeing. And then you would go out that same day with Dante supervising, and you would help remove the invasive species, like, for example, the European beach grass, and it would again create habitat. You would be going out there. So the next one of those is taking place the second Saturday at the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center, and then the third Sunday of every month we organize one that's similar with our partners at the Bureau of Land Management's Malel Dune South. So those are the opportunities that you have every month to be able to contribute.
Right. This is a completely goofy question about the Nature Center. That's one of the most fascinating buildings I've seen. That's the curved one into the dune, right? I mean, was that a house before, or was that built as the Center for the Friends of the Dunes?
Yeah, that was originally built as an earth shelter home by the Stamps family. And when the matriarch and the patriarch of that family passed on, their kids wanted to sell it, and Friends of the Dunes engaged them in a conversation about what that might look like. And we've rehabbed that building and created the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center.
Right.
We still have a really great relationship with the Stamps family. So I think it is a fascinating building, and we like to call it the gateway to the dunes. And we're open. We're currently open again. During COVID, we closed down for a while, but we're open again Wednesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I'd invite people to come out to see us. You can learn about different areas to explore. And there's a series of trails that take off from there, going out into the dunes and to the coast. So I'd encourage people to come out.
That segues into one of your goals is to conserve strategically located coastal properties. It's about land acquisition. How much of that is part of the Friends of the Dunes, and how much of that is going on right now?
Yeah, great question. Over the last couple of years, we've taken on probably the largest land conservation project in our history, the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area. We acquired that on October 15th, 2020. It's 357 acres. And this is really spectacular. Picture coastal dune forest. It's the furthest southern extent of the shore pine Sitka spruce forest in the world. It's studded with wetlands, birds flying everywhere. It's really rich in wildlife, just a beautiful area, and it has all of these existing trails. So we are currently leading tour groups out there. That's the third Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Just contact us if you're interested in going out for a hike. And we're in conversations right now, Paul. I think it's important, maybe we just take a step back and recognize that everywhere where Friends of the Dunes works to conserve this is unceded ancestral land of Wiyot people. I think it's really important to acknowledge that Wiyot people have been stewarding these lands since time immemorial. And I think that's a really important vantage point and perspective. And it also leads us to a partnership with the Wiyot tribe. So we're in conversations right now. A portion of that land at the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area will probably be going to the Bureau of Land Management long-term. And a portion of that land that's very culturally significant to Wiyot people will be going to the Wiyot tribe for conservation management. So we're not ultimately going to be the long-term landowner. We're the interim landowner right now. We're taking care of the place, and we're inviting the community to it. But we are going to be conveying it long-term to landowners who are our partners, who are looking to manage that for restoration, for public access, for, in the Wiyot tribe's case, eco-cultural restoration. So yeah, I think there's more than one way to take care of land, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one organization or another. And sometimes it's great to be engaged in that conversation about what's going to be best for the land and the community long term. And I think that's really the focus or the lens we should be looking at conservation through.
Now, you say you're the interim owner of the land. I mean, are you actually owning the land? Do you buy the land? And if so, how do you go ahead? How does Friends of the Dune go ahead and get the opportunity to buy that land?
Great question. So we are a land trust, which means that we can own land as a nonprofit in the public interest. And the public interest in these cases is public access for hiking, for horseback riding, and then also for habitat conservation. And all of us here in the state of California, we often agree to tax ourselves for conservation. We pass bond measures so that we can acquire really important conservation lands for, again, public access and for habitat conservation. And those funds are often available through different state agencies. In this case, in this acquisition, the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area, there were three state agencies: the State Coastal Conservancy, the State Wildlife Conservation Board, and the California Natural Resources Agency, all chipped in some money towards the purchase price of this property. So it was again, three state agencies recognizing that what we have in Humboldt County is so truly special and remarkable and beautiful and should be protected for the future, that they agreed to invest in these lands. And that's really how a conservation deal, I mean, there's lots of moving pieces to it, but that's essentially how a conservation deal comes together, is having a willing seller, having a funding source or multiple funding sources in this case, and having a land trust or an organization like Friends of the Dunes step up and say, hey, this is too important to have this conservation deal fall apart or not come together. And that's why we stepped into that role as the interim landowner. We've carried more than 5,000 pounds of trash off of that property, most of it from the previous ownership. And it's really pristine and beautiful and amazing land. And I would encourage all of your viewers to come out to the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area. And if you don't know how to access it, again, contact us at Friends of the Dunes, and you can come along on one of the hikes, learn about that land, and maybe share it with someone else.
How much of the dunes that you are in stewardship of are, people can just access themselves, and how much do they have to do it through you, through guided walks, or I guess there's special docent-led walks as well, right?
Yeah, I'd say, the Humboldt Coastal Nature Center property is 122 acres, and there's all kinds of trails there. It's open during daylight hours, and I think that's a pretty easy access point, a good first access point. The Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area has a whole network of trails, and those are also open to the public during daylight hours. You can access them coming across Highway 255 there from Cookhouse Road. There would be a place to access, and then also coming in from the Manila Community Services District's Manila Dunes Recreation Area, those trails connect. So those would be ways that you could come into that property. You can also come in from Samoa Power Poles parking lot. The Waterline Trail connects in. And if people are confused or are looking for a map, we have one on our website under About Us, Samoa Dunes and Wetlands. There's a geo-reference map, and it has the trails of that Samoa Dunes and Wetlands conservation area. So again, you can contact us, you can check out our website. The intent of these places is that they are for public access and use and enjoyment consistent with habitat conservation.
And then, so are there any ways that, say, people could schedule a private walk to connect with a docent and take them out on that in that way, or are the walks that are led from the center the way to engage with the experts that are Friends of the Dunes?
Well, I think that there are possibilities of private walks. I mean, we'll offer that. We probably would ask for a donation or contribution in order to lead a private walk. But we lead these walks monthly at both the Samoa Dunes and Wetlands Conservation Area, and also up at Landfair Dunes. That's the area I was referring to before that's had 40 years of love and restoration and is really spectacular. And we work with our partners at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to offer walks on their property too. And those are absolutely free. People don't have to pay anything at all to do that. And just contact us over at Friends of the Dunes.
Now, Landfair Dunes, you have to go ahead and sign up for or to be led into?
Initially, and then after you sort of learn the lay of the land and the rules of that area, you can get a free permit to go back on your own. So yes, to start with, you would need to go on a free guided walk that we would organize, and then after that, you can come to us at the Nature Center, and we can issue a permit for that area for the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge.
I've always wanted to go out there, and I'm amazed at how beautiful that is when I head out that direction, riding a bicycle out there. Can you tell me about the Humboldt Coastal Resilience Project? I saw
sure.
The website.
Yeah, so this is a multi-year study. The Humboldt Coastal Resilience Project is led by Andrea Pickard and Dr. Ian Walker, currently of UC Santa Barbara. And it's a multi-year study that's looking at, in dune areas, restored dunes, restored to native habitat, versus invaded, say invaded by a plant like European beach grass, which is a non-native. And it's attempting to look at the different conditions that creates, and then then model what it's going to look like over time with climate change and sea level rise. So what they're finding out, and it's in the last year of the study, of the 6-year study, what they're finding out is in areas where it's restored, it creates this sort of ramp for sand to come in. So you have broader dunes, and you have basically recharge of sand because it's all coming from the ocean, right? It's washing in and then it's blowing in. It creates this ramp where essentially the dunes can move up and back over time. Now, in areas that are invaded by European beach grass, it forms a scarp. It forms this sort of wall, which prevents more sand from moving in. And then you have, at big storm events, you have calving off of huge chunks of that. So you have a net loss of sand in areas that are invaded. And I mean, that has implications for our coastal communities and our coastal environments over time. And what it sort of points to is that we can create more resilience in our dunes, in our coastal ecosystems by engaging in these restoration projects.
A couple of quick questions off what you were just talking about. One is, are we doing all right? I mean, has Humboldt had healthy dune, what would you call it? Dune growth or dune capacity through this project?
Well, yeah, I think it's a complex question because in some areas you have net gain of sand into the dunes, and in some areas, particularly in southern Humboldt Bay and some of those dune areas, you have a net loss. So it really depends on where you are on what dune researchers call a littoral cell. So that's where all the sand is coming in. So it really depends. But one thing I do want to emphasize, Paul, is we have in Humboldt County and on Humboldt Bay in particular, some of the best protected, most intact native coastal dunes on the US West Coast. And it's right here. It's right here in Humboldt County. It all started with 40 acres at Landfair Dunes. But it's because people care. It's because people have made this investment of time and energy, money, care over years and years that we have this in our backyard. And it's truly a treasure. And I would encourage people to go out and explore these areas because it really is remarkable what we have here, particularly on the north spit of Humboldt Bay, but throughout our region. These are the most intact, best preserved, most native coastal dunes on the US West Coast.
Tremendous. Also, you talked about the researcher that was from Santa Barbara that was doing the research up here. That was a question, you kind of were alluding to it just then. Do you have people coming from all over California or the world even to study these dunes? And then the next question would be, are there other groups that are protecting dunes elsewhere? Have you been able to network with other groups and researchers in the 40 years that Friends of the Dunes has existed?
Yeah, I'd say Friends of the Dunes has a really deep bench of partners, as well as folks who are, dune geomorphologists, folks who study these areas. I think there's a lot of love for these areas in particular because people have been able to participate, Paul, in the conservation of these areas. And I think it's attracted people from all over the world. Researchers from Australia, like Patrick Hesp, have done a lot of work on our dunes. So yes, the answer is yes. What we have here is really spectacular and special, and it doesn't necessarily exist in all areas. I mean, you can go up into Oregon and they have lots of dunes, but they also do a lot of driving on their dunes, and they don't do a lot of restoration. So I would say that there's more to do, but I do think we should value the treasure that we have here in Humboldt Bay, and that treasure includes the native ecosystems and the people who care for them.
Speaking of valuing the treasure, as we're wrapping up here pretty quick, do you get the opportunity to get out and enjoy it?
Oh yeah, that's what recharges me. I think all of us who work in conservation should be out on the land because it is ultimately the core of why we do this, is that connection to land. And I think all of us can be friends of the dunes. I don't think it's limited to just to me, and I think it's a broad community that we enjoy here, a broad community of support. So I would encourage everybody to think of themselves as a friend of the dunes, and to get out there, to fall in love with these places all over again. And that's how they're going to be protected over time.
That's a great testimonial. One quick last question. Do you find people enjoy the hiking, or do you find people really enjoy doing the restoration work? I mean, it seems like a variety of experiences people can have out there.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks. I think some people enjoy maybe even a spiritual aspect to being out. Some people enjoy contributing in a way of their sweat equity. Some people enjoy the natural world around them and recharging in nature. Some people enjoy going out there with their families. I think there are lots of different ways to enjoy these areas, and none is right and none is wrong. So I'd say, as long as people are approaching this with respect and care, these are really special places. And I encourage people to come out to see us at Friends of the Dunes.
Fantastic. A perfect way to end. That is all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank my guest, the Executive Director of Friends of the Dunes, Mike Cipra. And I'd like to say you're a wonderful guest, and maybe we'll check in again sometime. And we'll see you next time on Access Humboldt's Community Voices. For the show, this is Paul Bressoud saying thank you and goodbye.
This has been Community Voices with your host, Paul Bressoud. If you represent a nonprofit organization and are interested in being a guest on Community Voices, send an email to info@accesshumboldt.net or call 476-1798. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.